Hello, hello. My name is Demetria Shipe. I'm an implementation specialist here at CobbleStone Software. Today I will be taking you through a breakout session that is going to cover a contracts quick start. So we'll be covering topics like navigation. We'll go over adding a contract. We'll also go over adding employees and users, as well as adding a counterparty to the system. Then we'll finish up the session by talking about our setup data. So let's go ahead and get started. I wanted just to start with some very basic system navigation and cover getting logged into the system. So you'll go ahead and key in your username, and then you'll key in your password to that second field. Once you're all set, you'll go ahead and click login. I do like to point out that you have a forgot password link here just in case you ever do forget your password. So we'll go ahead and click login. Now I'm going to be brought to a dashboard for myself. Yours may look a little different. Maybe you'll log in and only see the calendar. That's okay. These dashboards and these landing screens are meant to be configured right, so we are able to get them set up really to our liking or configured to what our system administrators would like us to see upon login. If you've been assigned to multiple dashboards or set yourself up with any of your own dashboards, you do have this drop down box here to be able to flip between the different dashboards that you've been assigned to. As far as system navigation goes, we have the top navigation ribbon here. This is really your main way for navigating and moving about the system. This is the place that you will go to navigate and move between different areas of the system. Now you'll notice different ways to kind of get to a different screen throughout the system. Those are often found over on your side menu. Typically that is on the left hand side, but really you'll be focusing a lot on the top navigation ribbon to move about the system. So let's start with adding a contract record. Now there's multiple different ways to add a contract record into Contract Insight. We'll start with probably our most standard method, which is to come up to the top navigation ribbon here. You'll click on Contracts, and you'll click Add Contract Record. Then we'll be asked to choose out the record type that we would like to add. Let's go with the Master Service Agreement. So I'll choose off that record type and click Continue. I do also want to point out that later in the presentation, I'll be showing how we can configure this list of record types. So just in case you ever go to maybe add a contract record and you don't notice the record type for what you'd like to add, I'll show you how to get that added. So we'll choose Continue. And we're going to be brought to an add screen for our contract record here. Now the add screen is something that is configurable, so yours may look a little bit different. The add screens may look different depending on the contract type that you choose as well. So I've chosen a master service agreement. And on this add screen, there are really only fields here that apply and are relevant to my master service agreement. So I'll start with keying in my title. Let's go just with something simple. I'll do master service agreement. And let's just put the year here. We'll do 2020. Essentially, the contract titles, though, they can follow any type of naming convention that yourself or your organization is doing. It's really just meant to be something used for like a quick reference to kind of see this record and know what it is or get at least a little bit of insight as to what this record is hinting towards or going towards. So we have the required field here of contract title. Now I know that this field is required because it's marked with a red asterisk. So contract title is required, type. Here's our field to choose on our counterparty. Now this master service agreement that I am adding, this is going to be with ABC Inc. So we'll choose them off as our counterparty. The employee set to Amanda Miller, that is really intended to be the employee that is primarily assigned to this contract record. So the employee field is meant to capture the contract's a primary responsible party and really the main overseer for the contract record. This is an employee drop-down field, so I could switch this down if I needed to. So perhaps Steve Stevenson is this contract's prime overseer. I could flip that over to Steve rather than Amanda. We also have the Department of Business Unit field here. Now, this is where we'll choose out the department that is primarily responsible for this contract, or really what I should say is the department that this contract is related to. I'm going to say that this is the master service agreement that is more so suited towards our information systems department. We also have our status field here, so letting us know that the status of this record, right now it is pending, but I am able to change this out. So even though the status defaults to pending, I am able to flip that or change it if I need to. I could choose out this contract's category. Now you'll notice that category is not a required field, so I don't necessarily have to fill out this contract's category. Perhaps it just doesn't have a category, doesn't fall into one of these categories that are laid out for me. That's okay, I can leave it blank, but I do just want to show some of the out of the box options that you would have in that category field. All right. Next, we have the location field used to determine the location or the entity that is responsible or related to this contract record. And in my example, it's going to be with the corporate location. I also have this rich text editor here for our contract description, where I can lay out or give a quick kind of summary or description of this master service agreement. You'll notice that this is also a field that isn't required, so I don't necessarily have to put information in here, but if I have it, it's always good to give extra. I'll just give a quick description just to kind of show you guys what it might look like. So we'll say MSA with ABC Inc. Whoops, can't type. ABC Inc. for new software. This is what our master service agreement is really going for here. We want some new software. All right, let's continue filling out this ad screen and filling out our contract record. I'll choose out my effective date. Now, I do also like to point out that the fields you see may be a little bit different, and that's okay, right? The system's meant to be configured towards your business and towards your needs. So if you notice something in your system that might be a little bit different, that's totally fine and pretty much expected. So we have our effective date here. I like to talk about some of these date fields, primarily like our contract notified days. So really what this field does is used in a calculation for your expiration warning date. So this is going to look 60 days before your expiration date and calculate out the expiration warning date. You'll receive an alert on the expiration warning date. You'll also receive an alert on the expiration date of this contract. So let's choose out an expiration date here. Let's gonna put this. Now you can, when you're using these calendar pop-ups, we have the option to see it in a calendar view. You can choose off a date and then edit the date out. You can also click here to get like a list view or just use the arrows to flip through the calendar. What I kind of like to do is just choose the date and then I'll just go in and make any edits that I need to. So I know I chose November 30th, 2020, but I can flip this out and I actually want it to expire in 2021. You also have this annual review date field here. This is what I've kind of nicknamed the bonus alert field. Really, any date that you plug in here, you will receive an alert on this date. So let's say, for example, on November the 1st in 2021, I would like to receive an alert about this contract. I'm going to just plug that date right on into this field and I'll get an emailed alert on this date. I have my contract and budget amount field. So for my contract amount, I can key in the dollar amount of value of this contract. So let's say this is K. I'll plug that in here. And for a budget amount, I may not have one, so I can just leave this as 0. We don't have a budget amount for this contract record. So let's go ahead and save and click Save and Continue. That is going to commit this contract record into the system. So we've moved from our ad screen where we were adding the information, we were filling out our fields, going through, entering our different bits of information. Now we're on the details screen of this contract record. So the details screen is going to kind of recap for us everything that we just entered into the ad screen. We do have the option to edit out any of this information. So let's just say, for example, we want to change up the description a little bit. I can just kind of hover over the description field name here, click my pencil icon, and it will open up that field so that I'm able to edit. Maybe I wanted to put in some additional information here, get a little bit more specific, or just change out. Maybe I made a spelling error, something like that. I can change it down in here. Then you would just click Save Record when you're done with your edits. I do like to point out that you can also edit multiple fields from the same field grouping at once. So for example, this details field grouping here, if I go ahead and click this pencil icon, it will open up all of the fields from that detail section for me to be able to edit multiple fields at once. So I could go through, make any edits that I needed to, and then I would just click Save Record once I have finished. Now I'll X that out since I didn't necessarily need to make any changes. So from my details screen, this is also where you have your files and attachments section. So all of the files and attachments, really all of the relevant documentation to this record is going to live in the same place. That's the files and attachments section. You have a couple different methods for uploading a file and working with this files and attachments section here. You can click this browse button to do a single file upload. You can also drag and drop multiple files into the drop files here rectangle. So let me kind of take you through each of the examples. I can click browse. Again, this is for my single file upload. So I will put in for this first file that I'd like to add, I'm going to go for my version 1 of this master service agreement. So I'll click open. That's going to begin to add the file to the record for me. So now when I scroll down, I see my line item has come in for this document. I can click on the book icon here to get a preview. Close out that pop-up. I can also click on the toolbox icon here to open up some additional settings that are associated with the document. If I need to e-sign, or if your company has purchased an external e-sign tool or CobbleStone's e-sign tool, this is where you can initiate one of those processes. I can click Manage to add some notes about this file. We could do a view text and compare if I had multiple files attached. Now I don't right now, but if or when I go and add more files, you could do your view text and compare. You could delete if you need to. We can OCR this file or put it at the top of our OCR crawlers queue or lineup. Lots of different options available to you within the document toolbox. I'm going to close down of this pop-up because I do want to show you how you can drag and drop your files. So I'm going to open up my File Explorer. And I'll just put this kind of on the side here just so that you guys can see a little bit of what I'm about to do. Now I'm going to take this. Actually, let me do this. Let's put this over here. Now let me take my fully executed version of this master service agreement. I'll take this and I'm going to drag it. And I will drop it right into this rectangle here. When the rectangle turns black, that's when you know you're in a good place to drop. Minimize. Right, so my file was attached successfully. So now I can see that I have the version 1 here, and I also have my fully executed version. Some additional things that I'm able to do, if I click on the toolbox icon, I can add notes. I can also assign a file category to this file, so that would be under Manage, where I can put in or select off a contract category. If you have them configured, you can also key in some different notes. So I could say that this is the fully executed version. Let's just say fully executed on, maybe it's 11/2/2020. Get as descriptive as you need to and save your note. Now when we close down of this pop-up, we'll see my notes pop in there. From the Files and Attachments section, you can also create folder structures for your files. You'll do that using the green plus button here. So let's create a folder for the fully executed version. We do a folder name of fully executed. I could give a description if I needed to. I think fully executed kind of covers it for me though. So I'll click create folder. Okay. And now what I can do is drag and drop the fully executed version into my fully executed folder. If I wanted to have another folder that kept all of my negotiations, all my different versions as they went back and forth, I can create that as well. Just again, using a green plus icon here, we'll type in our folder name. Let's say negotiations, and we'll click create folder. And now I'm able to take my negotiations, or really any of those different versions as we've kind of gone back and forth to negotiate it. So just click, drag, and drop it right on into that folder. Now, I do like to point out that these folders can have subfolders if you need to. If you wanted to create a subfolder, you would click and kind of start this process in one of the folders, and then click your green plus button again. So we'll just do an example here. We'll say example subfolder. Click create folder. And now we've gone ahead and created a subfolder to the negotiations folder. So I can come in, take a look at if I had any files in there. All right, so let's go ahead down. I do also like to show our notes section of the record. So this is where you can post up any notes. You can use this to communicate with your colleagues that are also involved in the record, or just to make a note maybe for yourself. So if there was something that you wanted to indicate or note off, you do have the note section here to do that. So let's make a note. We'll just say something kind of cutesy and nice. Let's say the folks from ABC Inc. are so nice. Just a quick little example for you guys, and we can save that note. So now, whenever one of my colleagues comes into this contract record and they're in the notes section, they can come in and see, oh, wow. So we had written that the folks from ABC Inc. are so nice. Great. Somebody else could also come in here and make a note. So they could say, what, you're crazy. Or they could come in and say, yes, I agree. Whatever those notes really need to be. Alrighty, so let's go through another method for adding a contract record. One of those other methods that I really like to show is your drag and drop files here. So you do have this gray rectangle. Now this is with some of the later versions of Contract Insight. So if you don't necessarily see this in your system, just let us know. We might want to go ahead and get you updated so you can start using this new functionality. This rectangle allows us to add a record into Contract Insight. It's going to OCR our file and use our Wisdom AI tool, which is pretty cool. The one thing I like to mention that with dragging and dropping a file here, this does utilize a document, a file, an attachment, something of that nature to kind of help jumpstart record creation. So it doesn't necessarily have to be a fully executed version of your contract that you're using to create a new record. It could really be anything that you want to help jumpstart that record creation. That document, again, is going to be passed through OCR. It is also going to pass through our Wisdom AI engine, which is pretty neat. And I'll talk a little bit more about that when we go and add a record this way. So let me go ahead and open up my File Explorer again. And I'm going to take one of those master service agreements. Let's take that fully executed version, but this time, let's add it a different way. We're going to go ahead and drag and drop, pop it right into this gray rectangle. Because I've done that, the system's going to ask me what type of file I would like to create with this record. In this example, I'm going to go with a contract record. So I'll click off contract. And I'll choose my contract type. Again, it's going to be a master service agreement in this example. And I'll click continue to add contract. Now, the Wisdom AI and the OCRing it may take a little bit longer or shorter, just depending on the length of your contract. A couple notes about the Wisdom AI tool. What the Wisdom AI does, it kind of scans through your document, takes a look, and sees if it can pull out any little bit of information from the document and pop it into one of the fields on your contract record add screen. Some things to keep in mind. We do have out-of-the-box configurations around the Wisdom AI tool, so it's configured to look for your most standard or basic fields, effective date, expiration date, things like that. If there's anything a little bit more specific that you would want the Wisdom AI tool to look for, we can help you get that configured. I do also like to mention that's definitely not perfect, right? So just because Vism AI has pulled something out doesn't necessarily mean it's correct. You would definitely want to have another look-see and make sure that your information like pulls in correctly. So let's take a peek. Now we have on the left-hand side here is our contract document. On the right-hand side here is our details screen. So what we're able to do is reference out the contract and start to fill out our different fields. Now what you see on the right-hand side is our traditional ad screen, so we can go through, start filling out information. Looks like this pulled out my contract title. That's pretty good. A master service agreement. They were pretty on there. Let's go through and fill out the counterparty. Now this can be also with ABC Inc. All right, now let's go through a location. I do want to set that at corporate. I don't want to do a category or a description for this contract, and that's just my choice. Effective date looks like it couldn't really find anything, so it gave me these dates, and I'll pop that in as according to what I know the effective dates are going to be. So let's say 11/1/2020 is effective, and we'll have this one expire 11/1/2021. All right, so let's go ahead and click Save and Continue. We're going to be brought right to a detail screen that looks just as if we entered the contract with any of the other methods. And when I scroll down to my files and attachment section, we'll see that file there for me. Now I can go through and change things down about this record. So just for example, the status, I did indicate that this was fully executed and it actually was effective yesterday. So I can flip this one over. Set a pending, we'll flip her over to active and just click Save Record. All right, so at this point, I do want to cover adding an employee record and some of your important fields there. Now, employee records can also be added with the drag and drop feature. So if you did have some type of documentation on your employee that you wanted to use to kind of jumpstart the record creation, you can use that document and run through the drag and drop process. You can also come up to the top navigation ribbon, click on Setup, and we'll go into Employees, and we'll add an employee. Now, I do like to note that the employees menu option, it may be on your top navigation ribbon, or it might be tucked up under setup. You might just have to have a quick look around for that. So we'll click add employee. Now within our system, we do have leveled licenses, meaning that I'm asked to choose out the license level type that I would like to add. In this instance, I'm going to be adding a standard user, and I'll continue to employee add. Now, again, we are brought to an ad screen where we have red asterisks for our required fields, and we will also notice some fields that are grayed or locked, indicating that we aren't able to enter that information because it's handled by the system. So an example of that is going to be like our fields here, entered by, updated by, employee ID. I can click away and try and get into these fields, but it's never going to happen. Those are locked, those are handled by the system. So let's go through and start to fill out some information about this employee. We are adding Miss Melissa Miller today. Now I do have some optional fields like for her title. I want to choose out Miss Melissa's department. She's actually in the information systems department. I could key in her email address here. We'll just go with a CobbleStone email. The email address is a pretty important field though, which is why we do have it come required down of the box. This email address field will be used when you go ahead and like configure workflows. If Miss Melissa Miller gets assigned as a contracts employee, that email field is where the contract alerts would go. So to let her know, hey, your contract is expiring in 60 days or your contract expired today, that is where the system will reference this employee address, email address field. So we do want to make sure that this is correct and is properly related to the employee that you're entering. Additional fields to enter in like some contact info for the employee if you wanted to enter in their address, phone numbers, different fields of that nature. You do also have this field to start entering in the employee's manager. So you could note off that Melissa's manager is actually Miss Connie Brown. Now, this can be used in workflows too. So we can have a workflow point towards our employee's manager that would be referencing this field here. Right, so let's keep going. Now, if Melissa is going to be active in the system, we want to have this active user field that you see here set to yes. Now, when I say active in the system, that means logging into the system. She has a username and password and is going to utilize one of our licenses. If I do not want Melissa to be logging into the system, I can set this active user field to yes. I'm sorry, I was set the active user field to no. Now, you might be asking, well, why would you add an employee that isn't an active user? Folks that are set up in the system as employees, so they're not necessarily active users, they would be considered an employee. They can receive emails from the system still. So Melissa Miller could be included in a workflow process. She could be notified with a workflow, hey, here's a task alert. She could also receive emailed reports from the system. So when we have somebody set up as active user, no, they would be considered an employee of the system and they're really only receiving alerts. If we have this active user field set to yes, they are considered a user of the system. They have a username and password. They can log into the system. Let's actually set Miss Melissa Miller up as an active user. We'll give her a username and password. Now, the username and passwords, at least for the usernames, you would typically follow some type of like naming convention. So we'll go M. Miller. I'll set her up with a password. Now, I'd like to call attention to the force password reset on login field. I've set Miss Melissa Miller up with a pretty generic password, but I am going to force her to reset that password on her first login. So Melissa can use my very generic password on her first login, and then she can go ahead and reset that password to something for her, right? I don't necessarily want to know her password or need to be like in control of that information. So I will force her to reset the password on her first login. I also like to call attention to the regional setting field here. This does play into our non-working days that are used in workflow. So we are in the United States, so I will click that off. I'm going to go ahead and click Save and Continue. This will commit her record to the system. Once we have this saved, and I do have her marked as a active user, Melissa would be able to log into the system. Now you do see a validation message at the top here because I didn't assign her a default dashboard, and I do want to do that, right? I want to make sure that I'm setting this new employee up and that they have a default dashboard so they can log in and see what I want them to see in the system. So I'm going to scroll right on down. And I have a section here for system dashboards. On the right-hand side, I have all of my system dashboards. On the left-hand side are my assigned system dashboards, which Melissa doesn't have any right now. I'm going to give her the default system dash. So I'll click off that line item and just use my arrows here to move on over. If I do want this to be her default dashboard, I'll click off that checkbox. Alrighty. I do also like to point out, just last thing I'll point out, is the files and attachment section for the employees. So you can upload and store any relevant files, attachments, documentation about your employees right in the files and attachment section. This look, feels, functions the same really across the board. So everything that I had just shown for contracts will also apply to the employee records and their files and attachments. Let's go ahead and add a counterparty record. So you can also use the drag and drop feature to add a counterparty record if you had some type of documentation to kind of help jumpstart that company creation. You could use this drag and drop. We can also come right on up to our top navigation ribbon here, click on companies and click add company. We're asked to choose off the company type. Now in this example, let's go ahead and add a company and we'll click continue. Out of the box, there are only two fields required to add a counterparty. That's going to be the company name and whether or not they're active. I do like to point out this top search bar here. This actually pulls from Google Maps. So if you start to key in your vendor information, like let's do one for CobbleStone really quickly. Let's say CobbleStone. Here we are, CobbleStone software. When I click that off and we scroll down, the Google Maps actually pulled in our address information from what is indicated on the search tool. Now, I don't necessarily have to leave this stick here. I'm not going to be adding in CobbleStone as my counterparty, but I did just want to demonstrate for you how that feature works. So let's add our company now. It doesn't need to be CobbleStone software. This is actually going to be ABC Warehouse. So it's key in their company name and whether or not they're active. Now, the active field here would define or specify really whether or not we want this counterparty to show in our listing for adding a new contract with. So let me talk a little bit more about that. When you are initially adding a counterparty, I think more often than not, you will want them to be active, right? You're actively doing business with them. You're actively adding new contracts with this company as the counterparty. So we would want this active field set to yes. But let's say, for example, you've been doing business with this company for 15 years. Then something happens for whatever reason, you're not going to be working with them anymore, but you still want to retain that historical information, right? You have 15 years working together, a lot of contracts back and forth between you guys. You want to retain the historical information that, you worked together at some point. So you don't want to delete them out of the system. What you want to do is set their active field to no so that the company will no longer show as an option for a new contracts counterparty. We'll have ABC Warehouse's active field set to yes. Now you'll see a lot of the other fields here for me to fill out. I have fields like their web address, any comments that I might have, a tax ID, so on and so forth. But really the only required fields, at least in my system, and at least as far as what comes down of the box, is going to be the company name and whether or not they're active. So I could go through and fill out any of this additional information if I'd like. Just for the purpose of time, I won't. But I do like to stress and kind of point out that this is our another example of our add screen where we have required fields and we also have fields that are locked. But we're really just entering our little bits of information. So we'll leave ABC Warehouse with the same address as CobbleStone, but I can always come in here and change this out. This is also where the longitude and latitude fields come in. Those actually pull in from the Google Maps. So if any of you have seen a longitude and latitude field in your system and thought, now how would I know the longitude and latitude of one of my counterparties? Don't worry, we don't expect you to know that information. We wouldn't expect that information to pull in from the Google Maps feature. I would never, never, never expect us to be privy to the longitude and latitude coordinates for one of our counterparties. So let's keep going here. Once we have everything filled out to our liking, we are able to click Save and Continue. That is going to commit this counterparty record to the system. It's going to bring us to our details screen. Now the details screen is where we can again use our pencil icons if we need to edit anything. So maybe one day I don't want to work with ABC Warehouse anymore. I can come right to their active field, hit that pencil icon and flip them on over to no. One other thing that I like to point out, especially on our company records here, let me scroll down for you just so I can show you, is the contact field or the contacts area subtable for our counterparty records. So this is where I can add the different contacts that I have for this counterparty. So I would click Add Contact. All right, now let's go ahead and add a company contact for ABC Warehouse. The company contacts are pretty important, especially like if you have our document collaboration add-on module and you want to kind of easily send this document off to the counterparty and to one of their contacts. You'll want to make sure that you have a contact set up for that. Also using our templates, like if you wanted to merge in any contact information, about your counterparty into a template, you want to make sure you have that information stored in the system. So let's add a contact really quickly for ABC Warehouse. We'll add Miss Mary Miller. So first name Mary, last name Miller. I do have additional fields like for this contact's specific title. So maybe they are the general counsel. I could add in a phone number for her, so on and so forth. Lots of different fields for me here. I do want to pay attention, though, special attention to this is active field, because yes, Mary Miller is an active contact. She is also the company admin. So let's save and continue there. So now I've gone ahead and marked off that Mary Miller is the active contact. She's also the admin for our ABC Warehouse company. Right. Now, the next piece of this, I would like to show you and kind of talk about some of our master reference data or setup data. Before I go on to do that, one other thing, or maybe two other things that I want to show you guys about the counterparty records here. I forgot to show this to you earlier, files and attachments section, which is, again, looks, feels, functions the same across the board. So everything that I showed you about the files and attachments section for your contracts, you could do the same thing in the files and attachments section here for your counterparties. We showed and talked a little bit about the contacts section. You have that same notes section as you do for your contracts would also go here for the counterparty. So if I wanted to make a special notation about this counterparty, you could note that off. Or if it was just something simple like maybe you left a voicemail for Mary, you know, you guys are negotiating something, left her a voicemail, you want to note that off, you can go ahead and do that here. Now, when I scroll down a pinch, we do have a section here to link companies. So if, for example, ABC Warehouse was going to be linked with ABC Inc., I could link them and associate or create that association within the system. Or maybe one of your counterparties buys another one of your counterparties. You can link them, get them associated with one another. Also from this section, if there were any contracts that had ABC Warehouse as the counterparty, they would be listed off here, and the same with requests. If I had any requests with ABC Warehouse as the counterparty, they will be listed off in this bottom section here for you. Oops, keep on scrolling up here. All right, and we're going to go ahead now and get into some of those reference data lists. So let's go ahead and start off with the contract, or really the record types, I should say. The record types for our contracts, our request record types, our counterparty record types, solicitation record types, etc., etc. They live in the same list, and I want to show that to you. So I'm going to come into Setup, and I'm going to go into Record Types here. So again, this is a listing of all of our different record types. From this list, I would like you to pay kind of special attention to the For area. The For area lets you know which area of the system this record is applied to. So just for example, if you look at these buyer agreements, it kind of looks like, wait, buyer agreements duplicated. But if you look at the For area, you'll see that the top item here, the top buyer agreement, is for our contracts area of the system. And the bottom buyer agreement here is actually for the request, so that somebody could put in a request for a buyer agreement. So again, within this list, you do have your counterparty types listed off in the same list, and that's indicated by TBL customer, so letting us know that this applies to the customers table. So this is where you see the example of company, that applies to the customers table. Same with customer here, that applies to the customers table, and so on. So what you could do if you did need to make any changes here, so let's see, I know I was using a lot of master service agreements, so let's use that. Let's say that rather than master service agreement, maybe I want to change this out and just have it be service agreement. So I can go ahead and click view on this line item. Use my pencil icon here and change out the type name. So maybe I want to change that back. Maybe I would just want it to be service agreement now. And click Save Record, and that will be saved. Now I can go ahead and click return to type list, but that was just a change. Maybe I need to add a brand new record type. Like I'm going to add this new agreement and I notice, hey, wait a minute, I don't have a record type for that. Let's go ahead and click add record type. And I'll give my type a name. Let's say, for example, we want to add a letter, right? Maybe we might have like a certified letter, something of that nature that we want to store in the system as a contract record. We'll key in our type name and choose out the area of the system that this is applied to. We're going to go with contract details and click save and continue. So now when I go to add a contract record and I go to contracts, add contract record, from my drop down, now you'll see that letter's been added to this list for me. So that's a little bit about our record types. Let's talk too about our departments. Those are another piece of master reference data. So I'm going to go ahead and click off setup and we'll go into the departments and business units. This is where we can take a look at the different departments that exist within our system. I do like to point out the department IDs here. Sometimes in workflow and reporting, different things like that, you may need to know the department ID. So this is where you can go ahead and find the department IDs. Also for the record types, you can find their IDs in their setup table area. So if I need to make any changes, I can also click view on the line item. So this will bring me to a detail screen where I'm able to use my pencil and paper, just my pencil icon here, and edit out the department name if I need to. I can also assign employees to this group or to this department if I need to. I have on the right-hand side here a listing of available employees, and sadly no one assigned to this department yet. I could check that off though if I needed to add Mr. Michael Brown in here. We can get him additionally assigned to the information systems department just with clicking off the name and using our arrows to move. So let's go ahead and return to the department list. I'll show you how to add a new department if need be. So let's go ahead and click off add department record. Now I would actually like to add a department for my risk management group. So I'm going to just key that in, risk management. Alrighty, then I would go ahead and click save and continue to commit this to the system. And now I can begin using risk management as a department in my system. Let's talk about our statuses list as well. That's another piece of master reference data. The statuses help to further define out our contract. They indicate where we are in the contract's life cycle. So we would go into setup. We're going to come on into record statuses. You can see your listing of statuses. You can see those related status IDs. Again, you might need these for workflow or setting up any reports, any conditions. If you needed to edit any of the statuses, you could go ahead and click on view and then use your pencil icons to edit out the name. So let's just say, for example, active. Maybe active isn't necessarily the terminology that we're using. We want to change active over to fully executed. I could go ahead and click view, hit my pencil and paper icon, and just change out that status name from active, change it over to fully executed. And then you would click save record. Now I actually don't want to affect this change, so rather than click save record, I would just go to exit out of there. I can go ahead and click return to my status list. Maybe I do need to add an additional status. If I wanted to have a status for when my contract is out for signature, I could add that in here. So my status name will key in out for signature. And then you have an allow email field here. This is where you would indicate whether or not you would like system generated emails to go out when we're set in this status. Now we do want to allow email here. For the most part, your statuses will be allowing email. This is what I've seen most frequently. The allow email, most of the time where I would see that set to no would be for a status of like agreements that are terminated or are held for whatever reason. Maybe then you don't want to be bothered with, hearing that a contract that was not necessarily going forward was going to expire soon, right? You might not necessarily care. So let's go ahead and click Save and Continue for that. The next piece that I would like to show, let's go ahead and take a look at our locations. So we can go ahead into status here and click on locations. Oh, sorry, I said status. I meant to say setup. So we can see that we do have the corporate location here, but perhaps you need to add a different location or a different entity. You can click add record and add in your location name. So maybe that's like a satellite office, or if you wanted to keep the location name just to the city and state, but you do have fields for the full address information. So let's say, for example, we are going to add a location in Houston, Texas. Key in that as the location name. I have line items to fill out the different pieces of that address. I can just leave it at the location name though if need be. So I can just leave in my Houston, Texas location and save and continue there. The next thing that I would like to show is our contract occurrences. You can set up your contract your contract occurrences under setup, and you would click into contract occurrence here. Now the occurrences are pretty much set out of the box. We just give you a pretty general list here. One that I see pretty frequently added to your occurrence list is going to be evergreen, so that you could mark off that, hey, this is actually an evergreen contract. So let's click add record and add something to our occurrence list. We'll really just focus on the occurrence name here, so we're going to key in evergreen. And save and continue. So now when I go to add a contract record and I'm asked to choose out the contract's occurrence, I can choose out evergreen as an option. I could also mark off, if this is a monthly contract, maybe it's a semi-annual contract, maybe it's a 1 year, 2 year, 3 year, 4 year, 5 year. I won't go any further than that, but you can mark off these different occurrences here. Now the last setup value that I would like to show you is the contract category. Those are going to be under setup and we'll come into contract categories. Pretty good list of different categories here. I try and think of the contract categories kind of essentially just like different buckets that you could be putting your contract in, a different category or different grouping. So you see here some options like an audit, if it's a bankruptcy, maybe a book review, breach of contract, Buy American Act. We did do, or do give you, I should say, a pretty full list here. But of course, we can configure the list of categories to your needs. So if we needed to add a record, we would click add record here and just add in our different category name. I'm actually going to go back because I do want to show you too how you can view and manage out the different categories. So I can go ahead and edit this. If maybe instead of an accounting category, I needed something different, I can just backspace this out and update the category name here. Can also close this and just delete the record if need be. Now I don't necessarily need to delete this one, but I could if I needed to. And I think that just about ends the kind of quick overview that we were meant to go through today. I do believe that I will be around to answer any questions for you guys too. So please feel free to ask me any questions. Thank you so much.